I mean, Hollywood has to continue to produce more of this media, and that the video game industry has to continue to produce more of this media in order so we can accurately continue testing what the effects could be. Doesn't it? Hey, I'm asking you this time. I want to know what you think. Feel free to send me a message. What do you think about that? At any rate, as I pointed out that most of it was just a large excuse to funnel taxpayer dollars, early estimates have been put on the package unveiled yesterday at $500 million. I'm not real sure exactly what they're doing to add up to that level, but to be honest, from what I saw, that's probably a pretty conservatively low number. At any rate, braced for a fight, President Barack Obama, aka the Occupier, on Wednesday unveiled the most sweeping proposals for curbing gun violence in 2 decades, pressing a reluctant Congress to pass universal background checks and bans on military-style assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition magazines like the ones used in Newtown, Connecticut school shooting. Excuse me, folks. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather tonight. A month after that horrific massacre, the Occupier also used his presidential powers, which seem to be growing by the minute, to enact 23 measures that don't require the bracing of lawmakers or the backing of lawmakers either. The president's executive actions include ordering federal agencies to make more data available for background checks, appointing a director for the ATF, and directing the Centers for Disease Control to research gun violence. But the president, speaking at the White House ceremony, focused his attention on the divided Congress, saying only lawmakers could enact the most effective measures for preventing more mass shootings. Do you see how sweetly this article is trying to gin up the hero and savior that the Occupier is? And how it's even there quick to point out that it's Congress's fault that more hasn't already been done. Quote, to make a real and lasting difference, Congress must act. And Congress must act soon. The Occupier vowed to use whatever weight this office holds to press lawmakers into action on his $500 million plan. He is also calling for improvements in school safety, including putting 1,000 police officers in schools and bolstering mental health care by training more health professionals to deal with young people who may be at risk. Okay, I'm sorry. How many schools are there in America? How many schools are each one of those new 1,000 officers going to have to work in? I mean, fortunately, a lot of schools in this part of the country already have resource officers, so I guess we've got that covered. But still, 1,000 officers for... how many states would that get covered? Anyway, I digress. Acknowledging the tough fight ahead, the Occupier said there will be pundits, politicians, and special interest groups that will seek to gin up fear that the White House wants to take away the right to own a gun. Behind the scenes, they'll do everything they can to block any common sense reform and make sure nothing changes whatsoever. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a direct response to certain members of the conservative media, primarily the most vocal of which that have been attacking him on this: Alex Jones, Glenn Beck, Matt Drudge. These guys have been on the front line before he even came out, because it's not hard to predict what was going to happen. This is part of the playbook. We've mentioned this before. We've talked about it here. You've heard about it on Rush. You've heard about it with Hannity. You heard about it with Beck. Matt Drudge has been singing the praises of knowing and understanding the playbook so that you can know what's going to happen. He doesn't have to come up with the news articles that he constantly posts on the Drudge Report to see it. The pattern's there. And we all know that Alex Jones has been out sounding the alarm 1776. There is no question whatsoever that this is a direct response to those gentlemen and a few other conservative members of the media. Who knows? Possibly even myself included. I don't know if I've managed to make the Occupier's enemy list yet. I'm doubting it at this point. But I have started hearing a few more people refer to I was trying to think of a clever, different name to call him, but we'll just call him Barry for now. I've heard some of the other folks refer to Barry as the Occupier here recently. Hadn't heard that before I was terming that phrase. I'm not saying that I'm the one who came up with it necessarily. Somebody else could have been saying it first. I hadn't heard them. Is this me blowing my own horn, much like a Michael Savage might do? Yeah, it kind of sounds that way, so I'm going to back up now. And let's get back to the point of the story. Why do I say it's a direct response to those people? Because, he said, again, behind the scenes, they'll do whatever they can. He said pundits, politicians, and special interest groups. He didn't say media types. These guys are hosts on the show. Typically, they have pundits as guests. So how do we know? Well, because they've also been guests recently on other people's shows where they've been the pundits. But my real proof of this is how he followed that up. Back into quotes here. The only way we will be able to change is if their audience, their constituents, their membership says this time must be different. That this time we must do everything to protect our communities and our kids. Oh, pull at the heartstrings. Again, asking you, the American citizen, to clamor for the destruction of the Constitution yourself. Please, Mr. Occupier, take our guns from us. Please. Please tell me that y'all aren't falling for this. More political theater. Followed up by the fact that the Occupier was flanked by children who wrote him letters about gun violence in the weeks following the Newtown shootings. Families of those killed in the massacre, as well as survivors of the shootings, were also in the audience, along with law enforcement officers and congressional lawmakers. Quote, "This is our first task as a society, keeping our children safe. This is how we will be judged." A call to action on your part to ask him to take action that's not constitutional. That's what that is, ladies and gentlemen. Seeking to expand on the whole operation of what they're calling for, trying to address gun violence beyond the Newtown shooting. The president said more than 900 Americans have been killed by guns in the month since the elementary school massacre. Did he mention that most of those were residents of the city of Chicago? Again, pointing out a city that is in the state that he came from, by the way, since he's supposed to be living there. One of the states with some of the strictest gun restrictions and gun laws in the nation. In fact, the states, again, this statistic, people want to ignore it, but the statistic keeps crying out. The states that have the most liberal gun ownership laws are the states that have the least amount of gun violence. How can that possibly be coincidence? I mean, if taking guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens was really going to work, if you were going to pass a law against guns to stop violence, then why are people still getting hooked on heroin? Why are people still smoking marijuana? Haven't those things been illegal for decades? This is political theater, and do not get drawn into it. You might as well, if you want to see political intrigue and what secret government agencies are doing on the side, you need to go pick up the Bourne, whatever Bourne movie you want to pick up. There's 4 of them. The most recent one's the Bourne Legacy. Again, excuse me. Not a bad movie. Probably one of the best things I liked about it is that the sanctimonious Matt Damon is not in this one. Outside of that, and again, nothing against Matt Damon as an actor, just can't stand his politics, much like most of the Hollywood liberal elitists. At any rate, back to the story. Quote, "Every day we wait, the number will keep growing." The White House has signaled that the occupier could launch a campaign to boost public support for his proposals. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans want stricter gun laws in the aftermath of the Newtown shootings, with majorities favoring a nationwide ban on military-style rapid-fire weapons and limits on gun violence depicted in video games, movies, and TV shows, according to a new Associated Press poll. The poll has been newly released. It was actually taken very shortly after the Newtown shootings, back when the raw emotion was really pushing a knee-jerk reaction by a lot of ordinarily level-headed people that, you just can't help but have an emotional reaction when you see that many kids killed. It was an act of senseless violence to a guy who had some mental instability and who was suffering from what the real perpetrator of this issue is, and that is psychotropic drugs. This kid was being treated, and the pharmaceuticals involved, excuse me, the pharmaceuticals involved here have been linked to other shootings, either through recent changes in dosage or to withdrawal. And there's a number of similar pharmaceuticals that have been linked with this violence too. In fact, in the last 20 years within the United States, no mass shooting other than the Fort Hood, Texas shooting, which was an act of terrorism, even though the current administration refuses to make that acknowledgement. To them, they still classify it as workplace violence. These mass shootings have had a link to pharmaceuticals, primarily pharmaceuticals that are used to treat certain types of issues like the ADDH, the ADD, and certain levels of clinical depression. That is where the real issue lies. That is where we need to be taking a long, hard look. But the problem with getting anything done there is these folks are writing pretty big checks to the campaigns of senators and representatives and presidential candidates on both sides of the aisle, and even some of the independents. According to this same poll, a lopsided 84% of adults would like to see the establishment of a federal standard for background checks for people buying guns at gun shows. The president, of course, better known as the occupier, based his proposals on recommendations from an administration-wide task force led by everybody's favorite Uncle Joe Biden. His plan marks the most comprehensive effort to address gun violence since Congress passed the 1994 ban on high-grade military-style assault weapons. The ban expired in 2004, and Obama